important thing about GB News, and it's brought something completely different to the landscape.
The mainstream is all about keeping the status quo as it is, ticking along quite nicely. They don't want to ask difficult questions.
GB News exists because there is a desperate need for fearless journalism that puts the people first.
GB News came on the scene as a disruptor, and it has always been a disruptor ever since.
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink until now.
Well, the reality is that most British journalists are afraid. That's not GB News.
Journalism is journalism at the end of the day, and we're not here to serve any masters. Our masters are our audience.
We're here to talk about things in a way that have never been broadcast on British Airways before.
Do not miss a moment on GB News.
The #1 news channel in the country.
Hello and welcome to The Late Show Live from wherever you are watching around the world. Tonight on the show,
Christianity is facing an existential threat in Nigeria. Thousands and thousands of Christians are being killed.
yes, President Trump hands Nigeria a massive £1.6 billion health package in return for protecting Christians. Why does Keir Starmer not seem to care? Also tonight,
we have nothing to do with Epstein, the Democrats do. All of his friends were Democrats.
this is extraordinary. The US government has warned of untrue and sensationalist claims after documents released in the Epstein files launched fresh accusations against Donald Trump, who has, a tad surprisingly, come out in support of Bill Clinton. And you beauty, a victory for the farmers. The government announces the watering down of the inheritance tax plans. But has it gone far enough? Also,
China, 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 China.
I wonder what we're going to be talking about. The threat of war is real, ladies and gentlemen, but are we focusing on the wrong threats? A leaked report says that China is confident it can take Taiwan by 2027. Should ours move from Moscow to Beijing? And even though we are live in London, we are still bringing you all the news from Washington, D.C., all the stories America's talking about and that matter to Britain too at home. And of course, a nightmare before Christmas. A major incident has been declared in Shropshire. This will make you think twice before getting on a narrowboat. Plus,
Do you know what you're saying? Do you know how to get home?
No.
I'm saying.
I promised on this channel I wouldn't rub it in about the Ashes, and I won't. Instead, I'll celebrate what looks like one of the great stag doos from the English cricket lads in Queensland. Also, what's going on here? My producer forced me to say this. And a very meowy Christmas from one for Liz Navi Cat. I'm Will Kingston, and this is The Late Show Live. I've got a newfound appreciation for Ben and Patrick. I wasn't quite aware of how much speed it took to get from that position to this seat, the things that you learn on the job. I'm Will Kingston, and this is The Late Show Live. Of course, it's a thrill to be joined by my panel tonight, and there are some serious conversations that need to be had, and we'll have some fun along the way. It may be the festive season, but the news is still coming thick and fast from DC. The US has signed a £1.6 billion aid deal with Nigeria, tied to the West African country protecting Christians from persecution. The US State Department said the new agreement was negotiated in connection with reforms the Nigerian government has made to prioritise protecting Christian populations from violence. The situation is complex. Whether it constitutes a genocide is debatable, but there's certainly been more people on the left looking for nuance in Nigeria than in Gaza. As an aside, the ongoing atrocity was partially brought to Trump's attention by that great political sage, rapper Nicki Minaj.
I would like to thank President Trump for prioritizing this issue and for his leadership on the global stage in calling for urgent action to defend Christians in Nigeria, to combat extremism, and to bring a stop to violence against those who simply want to exercise their natural right to freedom of religion or belief.
Some of her other wisdom includes, these little rappers, I can see them in my dash cam. I know they grouchy like Oscar up the trash can. I floss every day, but I ain't a dentist. And I am Nicki Minaj. I mac them dudes up, back coos up, and chuck the deuce up. But I digress. What can we learn from Trump's deal? First, it is an acknowledgement that Christianity is under attack, both in the West and further afield. And too many people are turning a blind eye because, quite frankly, there are no Jews in Nigeria to blame or out of fear of being called Islamophobic. Second, the fact this story has been so relatively ignored until the Trump administration took an interest indicates the continuing focus on Gaza and Ukraine has more to do with ideological interests than humanitarian interests. And finally, leverage matters. Trump used his power and money to achieve a political aim. If only Keir Starmer could do the same, perhaps starting with withdrawing aid to those pesky countries that don't seem to be willing to take back their criminals. Joining me is a fantastic panel tonight. James D. Boys, a senior research fellow at the UCL Centre on US Politics, political commentator Matthew Stadlin, and GB News contributor and comedian Steve N. Allen. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me this evening, particularly at such an early hour, but important topics to discuss. Steve, I'll start with you. Has Trump done the right thing here?
I think so, and I think anyone who tries to push back against it, all you've got to do is run a little test where you take out some specific words and pop in some more general ones. You get rid of the word Christian and put religious in there. This would be a move to try and stop people from being persecuted because of religious persecution. Well, who's going to argue against that? And that really shows where your bias is, where your prejudice is. When you chunk up, as they say in NLP, you make it a vaguer argument, you can see what your problem is. So, yeah, look, if you're giving aid, of course, I think whoever gives aid is allowed to have some conditions based on it. And what we should also say here is that in the past, Trump made noises about more of a military action. I'm glad that he always ends up going down the money version. Hopefully, eventually that will work with Russia. But I'd rather see economic battles than actual battles. So hopefully this has some good impact.
Well, Matthew, surely you can agree with that this is a diplomatic coup if in absence of a military intervention?
Difficult to get inside Donald Trump's head, and I don't suppose I'm probably best placed to do so. What I think I know is that when Elon Musk was involved with Doge, didn't last very long, as many of us predicted, there was an enormous slashing of vital aid, not least to countries in Africa. That's point one. Point two, I don't want Christians or Muslims or anyone else living in Nigeria to be killed. I don't suspect, but correct me if I'm wrong, you're an expert in Nigerian politics. I'm certainly not an expert.
I have been for years, Matthew.
I'm certainly not a Nigerian political expert. My loose understanding in doing some research for this show is that there have been a lot of Christians and a lot of Muslims who have been murdered in Nigeria. And indeed, when you look at Boko Haram, the terrorist organisation, evil, they kill some Christians and they also kill a lot of Muslims and they kill at times indiscriminately. So my concern, to the extent that I've thought about Nigeria, and I confess I haven't thought a huge amount about it, is that aid is targeted indiscriminately to make sure that no one is the victim of terror organisations or any other murderers.
James, your response?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We use the word genocide, and the great question of, is this a genocide? Those of us who are old enough to remember might remember back in the 1990s when Bill Clinton was president, and there were great tragedies in Rwanda, for example, and the excuse for not getting involved there militarily, as you rightly point out, Steve, was the fact that it was an act of genocide on the basis that terminology matters, and there were some great attempts to wiggle out of that. I think Donald Trump here has attempted to do something through the use of the American great assets it has in its financial markets rather than using military might, which I think I would agree entirely with. And also, you know, he's got a huge Christian market at home, which I think is going to be playing a great significance moving into the midterm elections. So it's a win-win scenario for Donald Trump in this case, I think.
That political angle is interesting. But, Steve, I want to come to you on something I said earlier, and that is we have heard relatively little about Nigeria. Matthew was joking, but there's a serious point there. There is a reason we are not experts in Nigerian politics because, quite frankly, no one talks about Nigerian politics. But a heck of a lot of people would say they're experts about Gaza and the Middle East after the last 24 to 36 months, when many of them aren't. Is this yet another example of basically the double standard that Israel has to face every day, that it's only when Trump gets involved and shows an active interest are we starting to talk about this? But plenty of people are happy to talk about Israel. Plenty of people are happy to talk about Ukraine. Why is Nigeria only coming up now when there is potentially a genocide taking place?
I mean, I'm talking about it because of Nicki Minaj. I'm one step higher up that chain. No, it shows you're right, but the same way of framing that argument is it's bias, isn't it? It's that people are more interested in certain stories, therefore the newspapers are more interested in certain stories, the media outlets are. So there is a little bit of that, the lens through which we can get... You can't have all the information from the entire planet thrown into your head. So there is this filtering system that happens through social media, and other means, which, you know, there are loads of other things that we can't list right now that we probably should be talking about.
I can try and help answer that question if I may. So as long as I've been alive, people in this country and indeed America have been, many, not everyone, preoccupied by what happens in Israel and in Gaza and in the West Bank. And I think that's partly because the Middle East is seen as strategically very important for all sorts of reasons. Why are we not as interested as we should be in what's happening in Nigeria? You could ask the same question, why did we take so little interest in the horrors that were perpetrated in the Congo? You could take other countries as well. I suspect that it's partly attention span. It's partly what is flooding our social media feeds these days. It's partly about strategic interests. And to some extent, yes, it's about personal biases. And if what you're hinting at is that some people, let's loosely say, on the left, and the left, like the right, is a very broad spectrum, are particularly interested in Israel's behaviour because they are anti-Semitic, well, some people who criticise Israel are anti-Semitic. Many people who criticise Israel, or I should say Israeli policy, are not.
James, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the great challenges you've got, and I wouldn't disagree with many of that, quite frankly, one of the problems you have is that governments, like media organisations, are very, very good at focusing upon one or two elements at a point, at any one time. And let's be honest about it, we've had Ukraine for the last several years. Gaza, Israel, Palestine has been, as you rightly point out, ongoing for a long, long, long time. But right now, because of the incidents following October, the year before last, understandably on the mindset of a lot of people, and governments, like media entities, focus very well on one thing at a time. And moving on to something like this, I think it becomes a problem from attention spans.
I agree with that, which is why we're going to be asking why we're talking about lobsters in the next segment.
That doesn't wonder a question.
But we will get to that. I also want to cover off what I find a great frustration. So what Trump has done here is he's used leverage. He said, yes, we have a foreign aid budget. We will use it, but we will use it conditionally. Now, the conditional use of aid is nothing new. I remember in the George W. Bush years, there was debate around whether or not conditional aid should be applied for countries that have pro-life policies, for example. We don't seem to have that same appetite in the UK. There is leverage that this country still has. For example, in the event of taking back criminals, if we want, for example, Pakistan to take back illegal migrants, which they seem at the moment somewhat unwilling to do. Why doesn't Keir Starmer learn the lesson of this, which is why don't you use your leverage as a superpower to actually achieve policy aims?
Yeah, I agree, you should do. At least we heard noises of using the visa system to try and get some leverage, which is another tool that Starmer has in his arsenal to try and make things work. If you want to have deals with countries where you would have people, especially people who've been convicted of some sort of crime long enough to serve prison sentences, so we have a system where they should be deported. If that country is not playing ball, then it is time to look at, you know, what else you don't get for it. I don't think that would be harsh. I reckon you could find a way of selling that to the left, and that's the only reason it wouldn't be...
Well, I'm going to try and sell that to the left. Matthew, is that sellable too?
There are plenty of people on the left, far to the left of me, who don't think that I speak for the left, let me assure you. Listen, a very big part of our international aid budget, and the reason that we give money abroad is to do with soft power, is to do with the influence that we can exert over other countries around the world that doesn't involve the use of force of arms. Of course, a lot of it is about helping very, very unfortunate people. We've got plenty in our own country, but very unfortunate people around the world, so we are not seeing ourselves only as an island. And you often hear arguments, charity starts at home when we've got some rough sleepers, which is horrific. Why would we ever give money to anyone else around the world? We'd never give anything to anyone if we said that, if we used that argument. As far as using this tactically, as it were, so in the case of a country that doesn't accept criminals that we wish to deport, and I haven't seen much evidence of that, but let's say that's the case, then I don't think it's completely unreasonable for conversations to be had with other governments. Say, look, we are giving you aid. The very least you can do is take people that we wish to deport back to your country.
Well, let's hope that those conversations occur quickly, because I've not seen enough of them from this Labor government. Still ahead on The Late Show Live. Pushback from the White House as new documents from the Epstein files launch fresh accusations against Donald Trump. But next, the government's new animal rights crackdown will make boiling live lobster illegal, but no mention of a ban on halal meat. Is Labor running scared of the Muslim vote? This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. Thank you for staying with us into the early hours. Of course, if you're going to stay with us, why not have a chat with us at gbnews.com/your say. The comments are already coming in thick and fast. Bernadette says, Starmer wants them here. Stop talking rubbish. You know it and we know it. The gaslighting doesn't work anymore. Not directed at anyone in particular. But someone that is directed at someone, Tress. How's that soft power going then, Matthew? Now, what I think she's inferring is, well, we think in the textbooks that the use of aid leads to soft power, but what really has the UK achieved when it comes to soft power in the last 20 or 30 years? Is your argument a hypothetical as opposed to actually being in theory?
It's difficult to measure, and you'd have to look at the country by country to get a better sense of it. I'm not the best person to argue for that. You have to ask someone at the Foreign Office.
Do we have any soft power anymore in the UK?
Well, I'm glad I got a chance to come in on this, actually, because soft power is a fascinating idea. I mean, it originates with a chap called Joe Nye at Harvard University, who only died relatively recently, and it was this idea that if you can't convince people with guns and bombs, let's use the soft power, the cultural aspects of any country to try and change hearts and minds. Now, the United States, of course, has a huge swathe of individuals that they can send abroad, from Britney Spears right through to Taylor Swift, for example. But the extent to which the United Kingdom can do that with some of the offerings that we have might be somewhat limited in comparison. And how on earth that would play out in Nigeria, for example, one can only wonder.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the ratings for adolescents in Nigeria. We'll have to check that out. I might get the producers onto it. Let's move on to our next topic. The government's new animal rights crackdown will make boiling live lobster and crab illegal. We had Black Lives Matter, ladies and gentlemen, but now we have #Lobsters Lives Matter. This is part of a sweeping range of reforms as part of the new animal welfare strategy from the government. You may recall before the break we were talking about focusing on one thing at a time. Well, this does seem somewhat odd. There was no mention, of course, of a ban on halal and kosher slaughter, where animals are killed without being stunned in accordance with Muslim and Jewish tradition. There were two interesting tweets that I saw today that I think sum up the concerns that I have. Great Yarmouth MP Rupert Lowe said, humane slaughter requirements for farmed fish and boiling lobsters to be banned, yet halal and kosher goes unchecked, all because we're too terrified to offend anyone. It is pathetic. And perhaps a tad more poetically from our very own Bev Turner, do Labor honestly think this is what keeps people awake at night? Privileged diners ordering lobster from a tank. Meanwhile, they hope that we're all frogs, boiling slowly, having the temperature turned up so that we don't notice as our freedom dies. Steve, I'll start with Bev's observation first before we move into the murky grounds of Islamic and Jewish theology and how that relates to eating practices. Is Bev right? Why are we talking about lobsters when there are people going hungry on the streets, to Matthew's point, why we can't secure the borders, why there are so many problems in this country?
Oh, I would love it if we could actually just have a hierarchy of issues and take them one at a time in an order that is the best one. So, yeah, I guess until you've fixed all the other problems, we don't need to be doing this. I must admit, I don't stay awake at night caring about it, but if I'd have woken up today and someone said, you do realise it's illegal to throw live things into boiling water, I would have been, oh yeah, if I didn't know about that before, that seems perfectly acceptable. So if it is brought in...
It is illegal, but there is a religious exemption clause in the law.
No, well, for boiling lobster, I guess that you don't have to be religious to boil a lobster.
Yeah.
Until they bring it in. So if it were thoroughly banned, I'd be in favour of it. Yeah, I'm not in favour of religious exemptions for anything, but as an atheist, I guess I wouldn't be.
Matthew, why are we talking about
this? Is interesting, the halal stuff and the sashita method of killing, which is the kosher method of killing for the Jewish religion. And my view is that and I'm not going to reference Rupert Lowe in particular, I'd be very happy. I've asked, I think, before to debate him live on television. Very happy to debate. We'd have a very robust and fiery conversation, I'm sure. But let's leave him out of it for a second. I suspect that most of those who are talking, at least some of those in the public domain who are suddenly talking about halal are talking about it because they want to get Muslims into the conversation. Now, as it happens, I'm not a fan, any more than you are, of religious exemptions for humane methods, so-called humane methods of killing animals. Let's be clear about various things, though, very quickly. One is that, as far as I understand it, 80 or 90% of the halal method of killing does actually involve pre-stunning. And as I also understand it, that is not true of the Jewish method. So as I understand it, the Jewish method involves no stunning. But the focus seems to be, when I've listened to this debate, largely on Muslims. So that's point one. Point two is, I suspect the vast majority of people watching GB News this morning, and it's certainly true of me, have had an Indian takeaway in their lives. And a lot of Indian restaurants, and not just Indian restaurants, by the way, but a lot of Indian restaurants, particularly perhaps those that are run by Bangladeshis or Pakistanis, will be serving halal meat. So there's a huge amount of hypocrisy here, and you can go beyond that as well, because I am a meat eater. I was at various points of my childhood a vegetarian. But I don't think many of those of us who eat meat would like to go into any abattoir. We try to switch off from it. So my basic point here is the focus at the moment on halal by some fringe characters, and Rupert Lowe is a fringe character, even though he's a democratically elected MP with a lot of Twitter followers, some of whom no doubt will be in America. The focus on halal, I suggest, is because people want to segue Muslims into a conversation in a negative and pejorative way.
And I can take that point, but why isn't this part of Labor's very otherwise sweeping animal welfare strategy? You expect, and I take your point that if it is the case that 80 to 90% involves a stun gun before there is actually the killing of the animal, that is still 10 to 20% of animals that are being killed cruelly, and more so if it is in the Judeo...
I would prefer there were not religious...
But why have Labor not put it there?
You could ask the very same question of Conservative governments before
Why have Conservatives not put it there?
So Boris Johnson, and I was not a fan of Boris Johnson, but he was someone whose government, when he was the Prime Minister, hang on, let me make the point, was seen by... And I know someone who works very closely in animal welfare, heads up a big charity, and he feels, I think, that government did a hell of a lot for animal welfare. They didn't tackle halal or sashita methods. So this is a question you could ask of anyone who's been in power. It's not specific.
Why the Conservatives, why Labor, why do political parties avoid this if it is an animal welfare issue?
Clearly,
which it sounds like we all agree it is.
Clearly, well, we haven't heard yet. No. But just very quick, clearly, because there is obviously a conflict, as it's seen, of rights. The rights of those people to practice their religion. We talked about Christians earlier. The rights of animals to be killed in as, and this is a weird word again, as humane way as possible. It's clear that there is a conflict of rights. I happen to fall down on the side of the animals, but I'm also a hypocrite because I eat meat and animals don't have a great time of it, even in this country where we have relatively good standards.
James,
I think one of the challenges here is, and nobody wants to see religious persecution at any point with regard to this, right? The problem is that I think Labour opened themselves up to that accusation by not including this, because if you want to say quite rightly, look, boiling an animal to death for public consumption is terrible. I think we all agree on that. But likewise, the obvious thing to say is, right, if we're going to tackle this, we can now tackle other issues which we've got great problems in terms of how you kill animals for public consumption. And to come back to Steve's point, you wish there was a way of organising these things. Well, there is. The government has a very, very strong mandate in the House of Parliament at this point. It puts forward the bills it wants and buries the ones it doesn't. And this was clearly one it wanted to prioritise.
Yeah, one wonders why, but one person who I imagine will be happy that they have prioritised it is the Media and Communications Manager at PETA, Jennifer White. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. Why should we care about lobsters?
Thank you for having me. I mean, look, we know that lobsters have the exact same capacity to feel pain as you or I. So, of course, we should not be boiling them alive. And, you know, no one would ever dream of boiling a dog or a cat to death. So why would it ever be okay to do it to lobsters? And the science backs this up. We know that they endure agonizing, prolonged deaths in that lobster pot. And that's why other countries like Switzerland, New Zealand, and parts of Italy have brought in similar legislation. So we do need this ban. It is long overdue. But also I would like to remind everyone that the best way to help lobsters, crabs, and all animals is to go vegan.
I'm not sure what uptake you'll have on that, Jennifer, but it's a cracking attempt. Let's pick up on the conversation we were having earlier around halal and kosher slaughter. I imagine this is something that PETA would be very firmly against. Does it concern you that the rights of animals are being put second to the religious considerations of particular groups in society?
I mean, the bottom line here is that there is no humane way to kill someone who doesn't want to die. So if you don't want to be part of the violence, then the best thing you can do is go vegan. We know that in all slaughterhouses, animals, stunning often doesn't work correctly, and they do have their throat slit while they are still conscious. And as Sir Paul McCartney said, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, then everyone would be vegetarian. And I strongly agree with that. So rather than pointing fingers, why not look at who is on your own plate? And you'll realize it's an individual who did not go willingly to their death. And it has never been easier to be vegan. Supermarkets are overflowing with vegan options. So that would be my suggestion for everyone watching.
Yeah, but burgers do taste good, don't they, Jennifer? One thing, run with me. It may just be 12:30 at night and my mind is starting to get a bit weird and philosophical. Why is it that we seem to care less about cockroaches or rats or other animals, and at the same time we draw these arbitrary lines, and it looks like an arbitrary line is now being drawn for lobsters, but not for particular types of animals that are being killed for religious purposes? That must frustrate you, the arbitrariness of animal welfare.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And, it all comes down to speciesism, which is the misguided belief that some animals are more important than others. And it's how humans justify mistreating them. And unfortunately, it's something that we're all taught from a very young age from parents or teachers. It's that some animals are friends, like dogs and cats. Some are food, like cows, pigs, lobsters, and that others are pests, like rats and foxes. But as you said, this is all just based on arbitrary human preference, and these are all individuals. They all have a desire to live, and they all deserve to be shown compassion. And that's exactly what my message is for everyone watching. Be kind to animals, don't eat them, leave them off your plates, especially we've got Christmas 2 days away, still time to have a vegan Christmas. And yeah, that's the best way to help animals.
Oh, Jeff, you haven't quite managed to turn me from hamburgers and turkey quite yet, but you may have turned a few viewers. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much. We've enjoyed having you on. Coming up on The Late Show Live, find out what's got residents of Shropshire in a panic, and also tonight...
We have nothing to do with Epstein. The Democrats do. All of his friends were Democrats.
Pushback from the White House as new documents from the Epstein files launch fresh accusations against Donald Trump. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This Christmas, we're inviting you to join the GB News family for an occasion filled with joy. A chance to come together and lift our voices and celebrate what truly brings us closer at this time of year. So whether you're with friends or family or simply in the spirits of the season, we would love to share this special night of carols with you. Carols by candlelight, tomorrow at 8 o'clock, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices, stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live, and you certainly got riled up in that last segment. Get in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. This is an early morning conversation between friends, and some friends are telling us. Neil from Yorkshire, yep, I'm still eating meat. Neil, mate, I'm with you. Tress, coming out with some really good input tonight. George Orwell, some animals are more equal than others. Labor playing out the communist ideology. Food for thought, pun entirely intended. Grumpy Grandma, no relation to the infamous Grumpy Grandad. Kosher plus halal are the same methods of animal slaughter, but Jews never impose kosher on the rest of UK citizens, unlike Muslims who impose halal on non-Muslims via marketing pressure on meat slaughterhouses and supermarkets. Matthew, how would you respond to that?
I would prefer when I go to a restaurant to be offered non-halal, non-sashita meat, but it's often a business choice by restaurants. So, for example, we have a local Greek restaurant that serves halal. I've actually spoken to the proprietor and asked him why, and it's because of the diversity of his clientele. So, if you're a business, you can understand why businesses serve meat that is perfectly legal. I think the woman from PETA was extremely effective. She hasn't persuaded me. I mean, I know the arguments about meat eating, and despite being uncomfortable with it on some level, I still eat meat. I was, as I've said, a vegetarian at various points in my childhood for 2 9-month chunks. First of all, because I saw a pig being slaughtered. Secondly, because I saw fish being starved of oxygen to death on a French beach, and on both occasions I was rather traumatised by it. But in the end, I was drawn back to the smell of whatever meat it was that was cooking in our household. And so I am not in a position to lecture anyone. And I would, again, caution people before picking out particular communities to look at themselves.
Yeah, well, I'm first to admit I've got a bit porky over the winter months, so maybe veganism might be one solution for that before I hit the fat jabs. Let's move on. Donald Trump has said that he hated to see photos of Bill Clinton in the Epstein files. Clinton was pictured alongside the pedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein in a number of images released by the US Department of Justice. Now, is it just me, or is it a bit odd that Donald Trump is suddenly backing Bill Clinton after years of merciless attacks on both him and his wife? This, of course, follows the White House today once again denying accusations very strenuously, I might add, against Donald Trump in the Epstein files. With me to discuss the latest updates in the rolling Epstein saga is Tim Dasher, who's the founder of Unleash Prosperity. Tim, an absolute pleasure to have you on. Riddle me this, mate, because he has been incredibly harsh against Bill and Hillary Clinton for years now, and this is a newfound level of respect and, dare I say it, empathy for the former president. Does that strike you as a tad odd?
Well, first of all, I think I can catch a flight in 2 hours. I can get over to the UK by tomorrow evening. We can have Christmas Eve dinner together in a meat smorgasbord. If you guys want to go, it's on me. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas, whatever you say, it's on me. Let's do it. But with the Epstein thing, look, I don't think you should read too much into this. You know, when your enemy is killing himself, you get out of the way and let him do it. And that is exactly what Trump was saying when he was talking about not releasing the Epstein files. This is a distraction. This takes away from his agenda. This takes away from, and it actually does here in the U.S. This actually takes away from his agenda. We had to spend entire sessions of Congress passing the Epstein Accountability Act. We had to spend, relitigating, showing photos that we've already seen before, asking questions that we've already asked before. And so I think it's just funny because, President Trump knew this was going to be bad for the left. This was going to be bad for Democrats. And that's exactly what he's saying is just, yeah, it's really, really terrible. But, keep them coming, though.
Well, Tim, you can understand the frustration of many people now on the right of politics in the US because Trump and many members of the MAGA coalition made such a big deal of these files before they came out. Now that they are out, and again, there are allegations in these documents. They are strictly allegations. We're not suggesting for a moment that there is validity behind those allegations necessarily, but you can understand why now that this is driving a wedge in the MAGA base after it was Trump himself who did make a big deal of it before the election.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. The dynamics there are not favorable, and that's precisely why Trump was trying to avoid going down this road, I believe. But you mentioned a really interesting point, which is the due process element of this. Remember, in the U.S., due process is everything. You don't convict someone, or you don't even bring someone to trial without due process first. You must have evidence. You must have substantiated evidence, and you must bore and prove that evidence out in a court of law. And the problem with releasing all these files is that you hold people to, hold someone accountable for something that they may have never even done or intended to do. Many people, photographed with Epstein are now implicated with him as if they were bosom buddies. And that is exactly what they're trying to avoid and what has happened now because of this.
Well, I think that's the type of argument Bill Clinton would make when he is now saying release the full Epstein files. A, do you think that would be appropriate? And B, do you think it's likely?
No, I think Bill Clinton wants to divert the fact that he was actually bosom buddies with Epstein and that he was flying around on private jets and spending time on private islands and doing things I would allege are probably, pretty, questionable for a man of his stature and the moral character that he pretends to purport. And so I think that is probably a distraction, saying release them all, knowing that you could never release them all because, again, the due process thing, look, that's the problem. You never were going to have pictures of every single person. You're always going to have blacked out faces. You're always going to have names that are blacked out. And that's going to leave room for conspiracy theorists to say, see, we told you we're not getting the full story. And I think that's a big problem. And I think that's exactly what they were trying to avoid in the beginning.
Well, Tim, that kitchen looks like it is ready for a very big Christmas lunch, hopefully meat included. Mate, thank you so much for your time.
In this house, meat is included, 100%, including lobsters.
Thank you very much for your time, Matt. Have a good evening.
See ya.
I'll bring it back to our panel. James, I'll start with you. I have to say it. Is this a nothing burger, or is there something more substantive to the Epstein files that is yet to arise?
No, it's not a nothing burger. It is, as Tim rightly pointed out, distracting all media attention in the United States at the moment. It's sucking all the oxygen out of the Trump administration's agenda. It has been for several months. There is an awful lot going on here, far more than we can probably spend time discussing. A lot of people have attacked the Trump administration for being too slow, trying to bring material out the public domain. However, its own Justice Department has been petitioning the courts to make sure that grand jury testimony has been unsealed and has done so successfully. It's handled, however, the main Epstein files very poorly. When they first came to office, they promised they would do so very swiftly. That has taken far longer than many people expected. It has split the MAGA base. You have seen people in Congress up in arms, quite frankly, about the delays and all this. They are sure that there is a great conspiracy amongst the American elite to perpetuate paedophilia and to commit great crimes. Now, having written books on both Bill and Hillary and now Donald Trump, this really cuts to the chase of these people and their own backgrounds. It is fascinating, of course.
In what way?
Sorry?
In what way?
Three very powerful individuals who have got a lot more in common than their political supporters might wish to concede. They spent a lot of time together in New York. They were each other's. Bill Clinton invited. The Clintons were at Donald Trump's wedding, for example, until the campaign of 2016. They weren't enemies whatsoever. What had transpired, of course, was the election brought them together as enemies, and they basically fought one another tooth and nail. When you look at what Donald Trump has said about Bill Clinton, I think he does feel a degree of empathy for him, realising almost certainly that these pictures were coming out, recognising, frankly, that Bill Clinton and Donald Trump were men of a certain ilk. They are a very similar age, they moved in certain circles, and they both had similar predilections. So I'm going to leave it at that from a legal point of view. But it's important to remember, I think, that Trump certainly was wary about releasing these materials. And I would point out this, if anybody says, well, that's because he knew that he would be implicated in it, the Biden administration sat on these files for 4 years and could have released them at any point if they believed that there was damning information on this, on Donald Trump, which would have prevented him from securing a second non-consecutive term in office.
Yeah, and I'll reinforce that legal act of security by saying that everything so far is purely accusatory.
Absolutely, because, of course, Mick Jagger's in those files, and no one at this point is suggesting that he's involved in
He
this.
claimed he couldn't get no satisfaction, which turns out to be false.
What is not accusatory is that Donald Trump was found in a civil court, so not a criminal court, but in a civil court, to have been liable for sexual assault. That's fact. And what is also fact is that Donald Trump, let's not forget, in the build-up to that 2016 US presidential election, there was a video released or an audio released of him boasting about grabbing women by the private parts.
We know that. James,
not my kind of guy.
You know, I'm not here to defend Donald Trump as an individual. I think he is clearly a flawed character, but nothing that's just been mentioned has any bearing upon the Epstein files.
No, and I'm not suggesting it does. I was saying those things are facts about Donald Trump,
many
about
people
what he said and what he's been found to be liable of.
Sure. Many people would wonder how much chance he ever had of winning a civil case in New York, but that is a separate conversation. Steve, I'll finish with you. Do you actually care about this?
No, I do. I think it's interesting, isn't it? And if they'd have just released them earlier, then we would have... You've got to burn through it. You can't drag it out. I think Donald Trump having some kind words about Bill Clinton in this situation is preemptively avoiding hypocrisy. I think, because we all know, this is just, he realises he may well be in the same glass house, so he doesn't want to start throwing stones.
Well, can I just very quickly say, wherever anyone comes from on the political spectrum, we should all, quite obviously, call out any form of wrongdoing, any form of sexual assault, obviously paedophilia, and I'm not saying anyone has been found guilty of any of this stuff in the Epstein files. What I'm saying is this should not be partisan. We should all, first of all, have a commitment to decency and to abiding by the law, way above our political affiliations.
Sure. Yep. I've got a second to come in here. The challenge with the files and the way it's being handled in the United States is terrible, simply because neither Democrats or Republicans actually seem to care about the people who matter here, which are the victims at the heart of it. And all they want to do is say, look, I've got a picture of my political opponent, I can exploit this, and the Democrats and the Republicans are both guilty of that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good reminder and a very good way to wrap up that conversation. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, all of tomorrow's front pages and the biggest stories from the UK and the USA. Also on the show tonight... I'll tell you exactly what's been going on in Shropshire and what has the local residents terrified. This is The Late Show Live, only on the People's Channel, GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens. Opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. I'm Will Kingston. Let's delve into some of the main stories on the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. The Telegraph, find me inappropriate friends. Yeah, dearie, dearie me. That is, of course, in relation to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The Mail, Starmer's humiliating U-turn on farm tax. On the Daily Express, the fight goes to completely scrap the farm raid. We're going to be talking in the second hour on whether or not Labor's U-turn does in fact go far enough. We're going to be speaking to a farmer who has been impacted by that change. That's one you should stick around for. The iPaper. Oh, do I have to read this out? I guess I do. It's part of the job, I suppose. Andrew, fun girls and inappropriate friends. Epstein files reveal new email exchanges. The Mirror, at last, Tess keeps dancing a twirl. I believe that's the fun little bit. And then, again, find me some friends. Email from A in Balmoral, ask Maxwell to source inappropriate pals. If there is a trend that you are noticing here, ladies and gentlemen, I don't blame you. The Sun, find fun girls for Andrew. And finally, The Times, farmers win, tax climb down. And of course, they also couldn't avoid Maxwell sought pretty fun girls for Andrew. I'm trying really hard to avoid the Andrew stuff, guys, but it is pretty hard when literally every paper I think I've just read points to it. So maybe the question is, this is someone who has been thoroughly discredited now. He's had his title stripped, everything pretty much that I think that the public wanted in terms of having him pulled away from public life. I'm sure they want to get him out of that palace would be one thing. But pretty much got everything. Why is this still on the front page of every newspaper?
Because it is interesting. Because to be harsh about the royals, they're not really in charge of anything. In our country, they are simply famous. And so if you have any kind of famous person linked to a scandal, it will be on the front page of a newspaper. So I'm not at all shocked. If this were a footballer who there was an email exchange with Ghislaine Maxwell, we'd be reading about it. So why would it be any different for this type of celebrity?
They're more than famous, though, aren't they? I mean, they are still fundamental to our society. Yeah, they don't have any real power. They have sort of notional power. They don't have real power. But any hint of wrongdoing, and we should say that Andrew has always denied wrongdoing, but the smell of it is not great, to say the least. And he's been stripped of his titles by his brother. So any hint of wrongdoing, even when it's been denied, and it is attached at the heart of the royal family, is going to sell newspapers.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. The smell of it isn't good. I feel dirty just talking about it. So let's move on to something actually probably even more scary. I remember that old tagline for Jaws was, "This will make you never want to go into the ocean again." Well, this will never make you want to go near a canal again, I can assure you. A nightmare before Christmas. A major incident has been declared in Shropshire. If you have a look at this, after a sinkhole swallowed several boats along a canal. Video footage shows a boat plunging down into a hole while the sound of cracking wood can be heard. Another boat was filmed stranded in the hole as water flowed past. Have a look at this.
Somebody's home.
It's like a miniature, small version of the sinking of the Titanic, but in an English village. I should mention, fortunately, 12 people were rescued in the chemistry area of Whitchurch, and fortunately, no injuries have been reported. More coming up in the next hour, ladies and gentlemen, including this.
We have nothing to do with Epstein. The Democrats do. All of his friends were Democrats.
Plus, is it time to direct our safety concerns to Beijing rather than Moscow? We are going to be talking about what I think is one of the most pressing security concerns in the world today. We're talking a lot about Russia. We're talking a lot about you. Latest weather update.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A much drier and brighter day to come, and Christmas Day also looking pretty decent. We've got easterly winds, however, and that is the key feature of the weather. It's going to make it feel much colder during today and the next couple of days, especially across southern and eastern parts of the UK. But those easterlies bringing in drier air as well as colder, so helping to lift the cloud, helping to break it up nicely into the afternoon. Plenty of sunshine up and down the UK, with a couple of exceptions. Some eastern areas will hold on to the cloud, but temperatures of 5 to 7 degrees, colder than it's been through December so far, and when you add on the strength of the wind, feeling even colder than that. Not quite as windy across Scotland, and under plenty of clear skies as we go into Christmas Eve night. Well, it's going to be a frosty one for many. We keep some cloud in the far north northwest, the odd spot of rain. Otherwise, it's dry with clear spells. Likewise for Northern Ireland, Western England, Wales, clear starry skies overnight, and a frost soon setting in for many places. But areas of cloud will still feed in from the North Sea into eastern parts and some central parts of the country overnight. It will come and go and perhaps prevent a frost in many locations. The breeze also keeping things stirred up, and that breeze strengthening, if anything, by dawn. Risk of gales around exposed southern and southeastern parts of the UK, and that wind making it feel cold even if it's not frosty everywhere. So bear in mind that wind if you are heading out, doing outdoor activities, Christmas Day swims, walks, etc. on Christmas Day. It is going to make it feel cold. Also cold enough perhaps for the odd sleety shower in the far southwest, most likely over Bodmin. But for the vast majority, it's a dry and bright Christmas Day, albeit feeling cold in the wind.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
This Christmas, we're inviting you to join the GB News family for an occasion filled with joy. A chance to come together and lift our voices and celebrate what truly brings us closer at this time of year. So whether you're with friends or family or simply in the spirits of the season, we would love to share this special night of carols with you. Carols by candlelight, tomorrow at 8 o'clock, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are watching around the world. I'm Will Kingston. Tonight on the show...
China, 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 China.
We'll be talking about Kazakhstan, obviously. No. The threat from war is real, but are we focusing on the wrong threats? A leaked report says China is confident it can take Taiwan by force by the end of 2027. Should eyes move from Moscow to Beijing? And...
We have nothing to do with Epstein, the Democrats do. All of his friends were Democrats.
The US government has warned of untrue and sensationalist claims after documents released in the Epstein files launched fresh accusations against Donald Trump, who, perhaps a tad surprisingly, comes out in support of old foe Bill Clinton. Also... How good. A victory for the farmers. The government announces the watering down of plans for inheritance tax. But has it gone far enough? And even though we are live in London, we are still bringing you all of the news from Washington, D.C., all the stories from America that matter to you back home in Britain. And of course...
Do you know what you're saying? Do you know how to get home?
No.
You can't say.
I promised on this channel I would not rub it in about the Ashes result. I certainly won't. But we will be celebrating what looks to be one of the great stag do's from the English cricket lads in Queensland. I'll be going into forensic detail on some wonderful games on the dance floor. Also, what's going on here? In my ear, I just heard a good luck. And a very meowy Christmas from one Feliz Navi cat. Again, the producer forced me to say that. I'm Will Kingston, and this is The Late Show Live. All right, slightly quicker that time, but once again, I think Ben and Patrick have the speed over me. Good excuse to get back into some sprints in the new year and after the festive treats. Let's get stuck in and away from my dieting strategy. The threat of war is very real, ladies and gentlemen. The problem is many Western countries are focusing on the wrong threats. A bombshell Pentagon report obtained by Reuters and released in the last 24 hours has said China expects to be able to fight and win a war to take Taiwan by the end of 2027. Keep in mind that last year, Pete Hegseth, the US Defence Secretary, said that we lose every time in the Pentagon's war games against China, or China. Some military analysts are sceptical of a Chinese move on Taiwan, and many others believe a more measured blockade tactic would be the most probable approach if Xi was to attempt to fulfil his long-held ambition. Tactics that could include launching strikes up to 2,000 nautical miles from China. Make no mistake, the ongoing conflicts in Russia and the Middle East are tragic and serious, but they should not consume the focus of Western countries such as the US and the UK. China is the West's greatest geopolitical threat, and I fear everyone from Ursula von der Leyen to NATO Chief Mark Rutte to Keir Starmer may have forgotten that. The Pentagon certainly haven't. Joining me for this second hour is my wonderful panel, James D. Boys, who's a Senior Research Fellow at the UCL Centre on US Politics, political commentator Matthew Stadlin, and GB News contributor and comedian Steve N. Allen. James, I will go to you first because this is your area of expertise. Do you agree with that comment that China is the greatest geopolitical threat to the West? And how likely do you think it is that there will be some sort of a move on Taiwan by the end of 2027?
Well, this leaked material comes hot on the heels of the national security strategy that the Trump administration released some 10 days ago or so. And in that, it attempted to explain the United States' position on the world stage and where it saw its greatest threats from. It got a lot of attack from vested interests around the world for a variety of reasons. But what it did attempt to do was to highlight the great threat it saw coming from China. And in Donald Trump's credit, he has repeatedly done so throughout this and his first term in office. As to whether there's any risk of an immediate attack upon Taiwan, this is something which US defence analysts have been worried about for decades. This is not a new concern. What is concerning is the new level of military hardware that China has managed to accumulate, and the threat that the West faces by having had its eye taken off the ball, arguably, by focusing upon many of the issues that we've talked about tonight, which are of obvious concern in Nigeria, in Europe, in the Middle East, and those are likely to be potentially exploited by China to the detriment of all else.
Yeah, Steve, I want to come to you because I want to use that term, eye taken off the ball there. I'm concerned that we are talking up the threat of what I believe to be a diminished Russia across Europe and the United Kingdom and talking down the threat of China. Do you think we're taking the threat seriously enough?
Possibly not taking the threat seriously enough. I don't think you help the situation by starting to ignore Russia. If anything, surely China's looking at the way that the West responds to Russia and tests to see what the West will do. So if we do nothing, if we aren't forceful enough, that's another invitation to try and do something with Taiwan. But there is that question of what could you do anyway? The idea of, in all of the wargaming they do, China seems to win. They've got more tech now. And also, if they just decide we don't get any more of their rare earths and processed rare earths, then we're done for. So economically, we seem to not be in a strong position, and militarily, it's not looking good.
Matthew, hypothetically, if China was to make a play on Taiwan in some way, do you think the UK should offer support to Taiwan, boots on ground if necessary?
Well, we are supposedly still a primary ally of the United States. So I think any involvement we might have in that war would be strongly linked to what America decides to do. Looking at the relative military hardware of America and China, it is rather chilling, given that we're on the side of the West in this scenario. We are in the West. Yes, America has many more nuclear warheads, but China has many more tanks. I think it has many more battleships, has, of course, many more troops. It is a very significant military power now. Quite what a hot war would look like between America and China, I'm no expert. You'd have a better idea than I am. I think it's very, very difficult to envisage a situation where American and Chinese forces would actually be meeting on the battlefield, on land. But the fact that we're talking about this, of course, it's scary. We forget sometimes, and we've been brutally reminded in the context of Ukraine and Putin's invasion of Ukraine, but we forget how vulnerable we all are in a world that is dominated by nuclear weapons.
I want to test that assertion that it would be very unlikely that you'd actually see boots on the ground, at least from Western powers, in a hot conflict between Taiwan and China. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is this conversation is focusing around the idea of should we look at Russia or China. I think one of the great failings of Western politics over the last 4 years, certainly under the Biden administration, was a weakening of alliances and an ability for Russia and China to come together in a way that you haven't seen, arguably, since Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger were able to draw those two nations far apart in one of the great diplomatic successes of that time. We now need to think not just about China or Russia, but a potential alliance between the two of them vis-à-vis the sort of issues that we're talking about.
And there's a little doubt in my mind, I don't know whether you'd agree, Steve, but at a time when Russia are talking to China and other serious powers in the world might be building alliances between themselves, America and Europe are drifting apart. And I'm fairly convinced that the world would be a safer place and we would be in a stronger position in Europe and the Americans would be a stronger position in America if that alliance was holding far stronger than it does at the moment. You can bet your bottom dollar that Xi in China and Putin in Russia will be absolutely delighted by the fracturing of the relationship between Trump's America and Europe.
Steve, do you agree?
No, I do actually. You know, when you have to just pick a side, I like the idea of the West being stronger. And sadly, at the moment, I think you're right. It looks like there is more fractions happening. If there were to be a genuine threat, I imagine we would get over that pretty quickly. You know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We'd suddenly be best pals with America again.
Well, let's test that with our guest this evening. We're going to go to Defence Editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Robert, thank you so much for taking the time. To start, just take us through what exactly has this leaked Pentagon report told us, and perhaps what's it told us that we didn't already know?
Well, the fact is, as your guests have said, is that China has built up its military strength enormously over the last 2 or 3 decades. And, of course, the ambition to absorb or reabsorb Taiwan into China is a stated ambition and repeated, particularly by Xi Jinping. And there have been various timetables given from his different pronouncements, and I think this is what the Pentagon is working on. And one of the target dates, because it's a great anniversary date of the takeover of the foundations, first of all, of the Communist Party in China in the last century, and then achieving power in the 1940s, that the deadline seemed to be 2027. This is flexible, but the great thing that China is practicing, and it is absolutely superb at this, is strategic and diplomatic ambiguity. Now you see me, now you don't. I'm going to keep you guessing. I have this ambition. I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it by fair or open means, or covert means, but it is an ambition. But as to China and Russia, that is a very strong alliance, because in the Ukraine war, in many, many respects, China is keeping Russia in the game. It is a very tight alliance. Russia relies on Chinese practical technology, particularly in drone guidance systems and things like that, because sanctions have bitten there, and probably Russia couldn't do a lot of what it's doing at the moment without that prime assistance, above all from China and also from Iran, funnily enough.
Yeah, and there is, of course, a great irony in you saying that China is brilliant at strategic ambiguity, given that it is the formal policy of the United States in response to the question of what they would do if China was to launch an attack on Taiwan. What I really struggle to understand, and I've always struggled to understand when we have this conversation, is that on one hand, the Chinese are an incredibly pragmatic administration, and most people agree that this sort of conflict would be ruinous for the global economy. It would lead to so many lives lost. It would be disastrous for everyone, and it would certainly be disastrous, I would imagine, for China on economic and humanitarian grounds. At the same time, Xi views himself as the great man of China. He said he's going to do this. He sees himself as the great man since, or the greatest man in China since Mao, and those two things can't be reconciled. So how do you read this?
How I read it, it's going to be terribly difficult to do. And that's why Ukraine is very, very important. China is looking very, very carefully at what has happened to the profession and the practice of arms by Russia since February 2022, because on paper it was expected to be game over within weeks, if not months. And they want to see the difficulties there and the sheer difficulty of getting across that stretch of water against a heavily defended island. Amphibious operations are no piece of cake. We're obsessed in this country, of course, with the D-Day landings. D-Day landings in 1944 were an incredible risk and took a lot of performance. And one thing that must be said about the PLA, the People's Liberation Army of China, in this kind of thing, it's largely untested. The Chinese know that. And when it's had one or two outings, for instance, a few years ago, a few decades ago, it did very badly against Vietnam, for example. So you're going to have caution, and they're going to be probing and pushing, but they will watch the performance of Russia and to see how conventional arms may or may not achieve this. And I think that Xi Jinping will try and do everything to get Taiwan, but use arms. That will be his last resort.
So there is a challenge there, right, in that they will be looking at how the West continues to respond to the ongoing conflict in Russia and Ukraine, and they may be encouraged if the US does decide to withdraw. At the same time, we live in a world of finite resources, and there is a finite amount of missiles to go around, and despite the US having an enormous military, navy, armed forces, they have to actually be strategic in where they place those resources. So how do they balance that messaging point that you've just mentioned with the fact that if they keep pushing resources towards both the Middle East and Russia, they may be diverting it from a potential future conflict in the Pacific?
I think they've got enough for that at the moment because they have superiority in numbers, as you say, in missiles, but it's quite old tech. The thing that is worrying, and I think this is if Xi can play the long game, he is getting nearer to success because the Chinese rate of innovation in things like hypersonic missiles, space-guided weapons, and space is now a considerable, if not a decisive, domain that the Chinese are moving up and are thought to be moving ahead in that area. I think it's very interesting when you talk about alliances. I don't think Western Europe and NATO comes into this at all, but NATO is more valuable, I think, to America and America's own personal defense to its own east. It's the Atlantic Shield than the national security document, National Security Strategy, issued at the end of November, would have us believe. But the other allies, the other parts in the puzzle are the regional allies. And can China really afford to alienate the emerging powers, or the accumulating power, rather, of countries like Vietnam, Japan, and South Korea? And I think that that's where they will pause. I don't think they're worried at all about Europe, by the way.
Well, Robert, the truth is we live in uncertain times, for sure. Thank you very much for joining us at this hour, and thank you for those insights. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, Chicago authorities refuse to allow President Trump to deploy the National Guard in the city to support his immigration crackdown. But next, a story you won't want to miss. We've been talking about it this evening. We'll keep talking about it. It is a victory for the farmers. The government announces the watering down of inheritance tax plans, but it is just a watering down. Has it gone far enough? Let's ask a farmer. This is the Late Show Live, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Now, in a major policy U-turn just 2 days before Christmas, the timing is interesting, the government announced this morning that it will raise the inheritance tax relief threshold for farmers, an announcement that the NFU praised as a huge relief to many. From April, the threshold is set to be increased to £2.5 million from the £1 million that was initially proposed. I don't know why I quite went into a Dr. Evil style voice there, meaning spouses or civil partners with estates of up to £5 million between them will pay no inheritance tax on top of existing allowances. Here's what Environment Secretary Emma Reynolds had to say earlier today.
So we've listened to farmers and businesses across the country, and we want to protect more family farms and businesses. So we're announcing today that we're increasing the inheritance tax threshold for individuals from £1 million to £2.5 million. So that means a couple with an estate worth up to £5 million will pay no inheritance tax when they pass on their estate to the next generation.
This announcement, of course, follows months of protests as farmers even defied bans to drive tractors to Westminster. Matthew, an encouraging sign that this government is listening to the people, or another flip-flop from a spineless Prime Minister?
I don't know about spinelessness, but it is a flip-flop, it is a U-turn. And it does make me quite cross, actually, because I was sitting in this very studio last year when this was being debated, almost with blanket coverage. And I did say that I thought the government had got the threshold wrong. This should have been about taking on tax avoidance, not illegal, but tax avoidance by very wealthy people buying up great swathes of land. It shouldn't have been about farms, I don't think. And I don't think it was probably intended to be about smaller farms. We're still talking about a lot of money, but smaller farms when the government set out on this. And
can I just ask quickly, if you could see that at the time and they had 14 years to come up with the policy and got it wrong, why did they get it wrong?
It makes me cross because they could quite easily have done this listening and the thinking, at least, before they rolled out this policy. And I don't think I'm wrong in saying that Steve Reed, who went on to become the Agriculture Secretary, now he's Housing, but before the general election, I think he'd reassured farming communities that there would be no change to agricultural property relief. So I think it was obviously very distressing and upsetting to not a vast number of people, but to people, and the government should have got it right first time.
The government should have got it right first time. I go back to that. Why does this government seem to make political mistake after political mistake when they had plenty of time to come up with a very clear position on a range of issues, including this one, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, before the election, everyone was sitting around going that they're going to win. So you think they might have heard that and thought, oh, we might win. We might want to come up with some plans to hit the ground running, which we were promised. But it is also what this government has been doing of identifying a genuine problem, coming up with a terrible solution, and then waiting so long to fix that solution that they get all of the harm and reputational damage that you could possibly get. And then eventually, when people kind of stop talking about it, go, actually, no, we will listen now, when it's too late to listen.
It's the same with the winter fuel allowance.
Exactly, yeah.
Yep. They lost so much political capital and they hurt people in the process.
Yeah. But then eventually flipped when there was no credit to be gained from it. It's ridiculous. Well, I thoroughly, on this, I very much agree with you. If the thing that you've identified is people trying to use farms to get around inheritance tax, make your solution never impact a genuine farmer. And if you can come up with a solution that does that, it would be perfect. All this has done is kind of tweaked the numbers. It's saying, well, we'll let you invest in a farm and get away with 2.5 million's worth of getting around the tax man. That's not what the solution should be.
James, explain this political incompetence to me. I don't think anyone would argue this government is being run particularly well, even the most ardent Labor fan. Why are they struggling so badly?
If only I could. I mean, it's terrible sitting here thinking, I've got my line, and then you. They had 14 years of criticising previous administrations. They came in, they said, oh, no, we're not going to be like previous Labour administrations, we're not going to be tax and spend, we've got it fully costed. And, of course, time after time, how many U-turns they've made in the past 18 months, it's quite remarkable.
I could give two possible answers. One is that I think Starmer undoubtedly wants to make the country a better place, but he's a technician. Yeah. He's a manager. He's certainly not an ideologue, and that can be a good thing because ideology can be a very dangerous thing. But I'm not sure he really understands what he stands for politically, and that can act as a black hole that can suck in all sorts of stuff. I think that's the first point. The second point is you could argue that he was the accidental Prime Minister. Don't forget, he turned around an 80-seat Boris Johnson-led Conservative majority in 2019 to a whopping, shallow but whopping Labour majority of 170-odd just 5 years later. And so there is an argument that actually his focus was getting Labour to the point where they could become a party that might one day be elected again, rather than a party that becomes government and with such a big majority. So their focus might not sufficiently have been, I think it wasn't sufficiently, on governing. It was about trying to resuscitate the Labour Party, which, don't forget, in 2019 had a disastrous defeat under Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, Keir Starmer, if nothing else, has done something quite extraordinary. Matthew, he's brought us together. I agree entirely with both of those points. That is
extraordinary, isn't
but
it?
we do live in an age, unfortunately, where people are craving authenticity and conviction from their politicians, which is why a bureaucratic, technocratic, charisma vacuum, I should say, like Keir Starmer, doesn't quite meet the mood of the moment. Back to the inheritance tax on farmers. We actually have the take from a farmer on the line, Welsh beef farmer Paul Williams. Paul, it is fantastic to have you on. How do you feel about today's announcement? Tell me how, if at all, it will affect your particular farm.
Well, Boroda, good morning. Yes, absolutely. I think many farming families will absolutely welcome today's announcement. They'll be getting up this morning to milk the cows and to tend to the stock and the crops in a much better mind frame than they've been in the last 14 months, that's for sure. And that, you know, that counts my family here on the farm as well. We're very much relieved by today's announcement.
Yeah, tell me a bit more about your farm. So this will take the threshold down from 2.5 million to £1 million. Will this hypothetically have an impact on your specific farm?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I'm the fifth generation here on the family farm. And the reason why I'm the fifth generation is because the family farm has been handed down over the generations, and I'm basically now on the farm looking after it in preparation for the next generation to take over. And I can definitely tell you that not one of the generations before me died a millionaire, far from it. And the reason for that is because basically they've only looked after the farm, i.e. in the government's eyes, a massive asset, ready for the next generation to take over. Now, had any one of those generations cashed in on the asset, then yes, they would have been very wealthy, but that would be the end of the family farm and the next generation. So that's exactly what each and every generation before me, and myself included, and hopefully many generations after me, that's what we do on a family farm.
Yeah, so in other words, there may be a lot of tractors lying around, but there aren't piles of cash lying around to be able to pay a tax bill. Do you think it does go far enough, Paul, or do you think this is just a positive but incomplete step?
Well, look, it's definitely a positive. Now, whether it goes far enough, there's undoubtedly going to be many other family farms. There's going to be family farms that are still trapped by this. And I think, again, we need to look at it in its entirety. The farming industry has never shied away from, one, paying tax. And, you know, we've never had a problem where if people realise an asset, then yes, of course, you should pay a tax on that. But this particular policy was going to obliterate the family farms because, you know, all we've ever done is look after it for the next generation. We've never cashed in on it. So, unfortunately, there are still circumstances where there are going to be family farms and businesses that are going to be trapped in this. And this is something going forward, we need to work on. It's a very good start. I've got to say that, you know, it's been 14 months of hard slog here, and everybody's been involved. You know, from the tractors in London to the talks with local MPs to our union representatives in London. Everybody's had a part in this, and why has it taken so long and such a hard road to get here? I'm not sure. So look, if they're in the mood and it is the season of goodwill, if they're now in the mood to listen, keep listening, keep talking, because there's a bit more work to do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you why you think it has happened now, but it may be too difficult for both of us to get into the minds of this government. So I'll ask you about that phrase, the next generation, because of course this isn't the only challenge that farmers face. It's an incredibly difficult job lifestyle. How, I guess, hopeful are you for the next generation of British farmers?
Well, you have to be hopeful, because this is why we're doing it. We're doing it to at least give them the opportunity to take over. You know, the one thing we don't want to do is we never want to leave the business in a worse place than when we took it over. You always want to better the business to leave it in a better way, in a better position for the next generation to take over. So this was a very, very hard one, because we knew if they'd have stayed on the same track, we were going to leave our next generation, our children, with a huge debt burden that the farm profits basically wouldn't be able to sustain the repayments. So, you know, we wouldn't want our children to take over in that scenario. So it was a very, very difficult position that many family farms all over the country were facing. So this will give us a bit of a good feeling going forward. As I said, that there's no doubt there are some still going to be trapped with this. Even more so the elderly and the frail who can't do anything about this. You know, if God will that they'll survive past April, but there are many people who unfortunately won't be there. So it's leaving them in a horrible position.
Well, strength and courage, of course, to all of those people. Paul, congratulations on the fight, and keep on fighting. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. James, your thoughts on today's announcement?
Oh, it's very welcome. I think we were talking before the interview about why it was that this policy might well have been implemented. And I think one of the challenges is that all politicians and all political parties look to gain maximum leverage from their own political base, and are guilty to that extent of ignoring those who they know they're not going to be able to draw upon. And I think if you look at the Labour Party, is increasingly an urban party, and when you move out into the rural communities, they don't see any great level of support. So why not move the tax burden in that direction and away from inner city areas? And I think what we've seen is a welcome retraction from that right now.
Still ahead on The Late Show Live tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Do you know what you're saying? Do you know how to get home? No.
As the Ashes result has been finalised. The English cricket lads in Queensland seem to have the best stag do ever. But next, Chicago authorities refuse to allow President Trump to deploy the National Guard in the city to support his immigration crackdown. We'll go live to Chicago to ask why citizens are being put at risk by Liberals. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News. Here's your weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A much drier and brighter day to come, and Christmas Day also looking pretty decent. We've got easterly winds, however, and that is the key feature of the weather. It's going to make it feel much colder during today and the next couple of days, especially across southern and eastern parts of the UK. But those easterlies bringing in drier air as well as colder, so helping to lift the cloud, helping to break it up nicely into the afternoon. Plenty of sunshine up and down the UK, with a couple of exceptions. Some eastern areas will hold on to the cloud, but temperatures of 5 to 7 degrees, colder than it's been through December so far, and when you add on the strength of the wind, feeling even colder than that. Not quite as windy across Scotland, and under plenty of clear skies as we go into Christmas Eve night. Well, it's going to be a frosty one for many. We keep some cloud in the far north-northwest, the odd spot of rain. Otherwise, it's dry with clear spells. Likewise for Northern Ireland, Western England, Wales, clear starry skies overnight, and a frost soon setting in for many places. But areas of cloud will still feed in from the North Sea into eastern parts and some central parts of the country overnight. It will come and go and perhaps prevent a frost in many locations. The breeze also keeping things stirred up, and that breeze strengthening, if anything, by dawn. Risk of gales around exposed southern and southeastern parts of the UK, and that wind making it feel cold even if it's not frosty everywhere. So bear in mind that wind if you are heading out, doing outdoor activities, Christmas Day swims, walks, etc. on Christmas Day. It is going to make it feel cold. Also cold enough perhaps for the odd sleety shower in the far southwest, most likely over Bodmin. But for the vast majority, it's a dry and bright Christmas day, albeit feeling cold in the wind.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. I'm Will Kingston. Dry on Christmas Day, albeit cold and windy. I guess that's about as good as we can hope for, really. A couple of comments coming in from gbnews.com/your say. Of course, whether you're in the United States, the United Kingdom or anywhere around the world, you can get in touch with us there. And the comments continue to roll in from D. Slater. This government doesn't have a clue how to run a bath. Far less a country. Eloquently put. Jackie Briggs, what a load of F. This will do nothing to help farmers. Their land holdings and equipment capital alone will exceed that amount. In the meantime, they work excessive hours for less than the minimum wage. Make that add up. Labour, and then a term that I can't use. But the passion comes across very loudly from Jackie there, and probably with some justification. Let's move to the next topic. Authorities in Chicago are blocking President Trump from deploying the National Guard as part of his nationwide immigration crackdown, a move which is now being backed by the Supreme Court, who have blocked it in a 6-3 decision. Donald Trump's supporters say the Guard is necessary to protect federal agents and citizens in a city ravaged by gun crime, and it has been ravaged by gun crime in recent years. The order is not a final ruling, but it could affect other lawsuits challenging President Donald Trump's attempts to deploy the military in other Democratic-led cities. Keep in mind that he has been largely successful in deploying the National Guard in Washington, D.C. recently. Liberal politicians sacrificing the safety of citizens on the altar of an anti-Trump agenda. Let's go to Chicago and hear from the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. Greg, I guess my first question's already been teed up. Are the Liberal politicians, and indeed, I guess you have to say, the Supreme Court, sacrificing the safety of the citizens here on the altar of an anti-Trump agenda?
Well, I think, Will, great point and great question. I think it's two answers. Number one, yes, the liberal politicians are definitely sacrificing the well-being of their citizens on, this liberal agenda. They're obsessed with these 80-20 issues where, nobody wants crime. Nobody thinks that convicted felons should be running around in the street, and yet the Democrats are defending them. As far as the Supreme Court goes, that's more of a technical issue. I mean, this is a very constitutionalist court. I know it was 6-3. A couple of conservatives, voted with the majority. But I do think that's because they're looking at this from the constitutionalist perspective. Does this warrant a national emergency? Is the president overstepping his bounds, by sending the National Guard? Now, look, presidents have done this in the past. Eisenhower did it. John F. Kennedy did it, to basically to integrate the schools in cities in the South, Democrat-run cities, of course, that would not integrate their schools. They would not let black children go to white schools, and the president felt that was way overboard and sent National Guard troops. But anyway, I think the point is, yes, the liberals are siding in many cases with the Venezuelan drug dealers. They're siding with the criminals on the streets of Chicago, where I am right now, and it's pretty ludicrous.
Yeah, well, let's put the legal technicalities to one side just for now. It's far too early in the morning for that. But let's go to the principle of the matter, Greg. The reality is, if you look at how the National Guard's been used in Washington, D.C., arguably a clearer-cut case, even the mayor there has said that has been successful. Do you think Trump should be encouraged to use the National Guard more regularly in instances like this? And I'll add as a second question, how successful do you think that this ICE operation can be without the use of the National Guard to support them?
Yeah, so on the first question, absolutely. The president and I think the people want more protection. They want safety in the streets. And again, Chicago is probably the classic example, but you can say it about many of the other sanctuary cities here in the U.S. But I think as far as, whether the president is overstepping, that's a different question. I do think that he's got every right to send National Guard troops if there's an emergency in that city. And you could argue that, 500 people being killed in Chicago every year. I mean, every weekend is kind of a tragedy in this town. So, I think there's some merit to it. And I do think that the people are upset that these ICE agents are at risk, at great risk. So they'll continue to do what they're doing. To answer your second question, is I think ICE will be successful at deporting illegal migrants, but they're taking a great risk doing it when the governor and the mayor, the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago, are not only ignoring but even encouraging some of these people that are allegedly protesting, but they're actually putting ICE agents at great risk.
Yeah, sure. I think even some of Trump's strongest supporters would acknowledge that perhaps there haven't been the numbers of deportations that they were hoping for initially. Do you think that's reasonable, and do you think there's much chance that actually can be turned around in the remaining time Trump has in office?
I do think so. I mean, there is a capacity constraint. You can only really deport, 500, maybe 500,000 or maybe 1 million illegal migrants a year. It's strictly manpower, but it would be a lot more efficient and a lot better if they had assistance from local police. And that's what's hurting them in cities like Chicago and states like Illinois, where there is pushback from the local government. And they're just not only aren't they cooperating, but they're downright, they're actually trying to suppress the ability of ICE, the enforcement agency, to deport illegal migrants. You don't see that in red states where there's cooperation. I wish that they would actually want to follow the law. I mean, the law is, detain and deport. And if you're an illegal migrant and you've already broken the law once, in many cases, the majority of cases of deportations, they've also broken other laws. And this is you're really putting the people at a great risk of violence in cities like Chicago.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the bell, or that rings a certain bell for viewers in the United Kingdom as well. If only it was as simple. Unfortunately, there are legal barriers that we need to deal with to get there. Greg, wonderful analysis. Thank you for coming on the show this evening.
Thanks, Will.
James, I'll start with you. Again, too late for legal technicalities. It sounds like this may have been technically the right ruling from Supreme Court. But do you think on principle Trump should have the right to use the National Guard in this way?
Well, the President does have the right to use the National Guard in times of absolute emergency, and Greg was quite right to raise the issues of John F. Kennedy and Dwight D. Eisenhower. Unfortunately, that was enacting a very specific ruling from the Supreme Court, whereas this is a more general case about, I believe there's a national emergency, the local mayor in this case won't act, we will do so, and that is why the Supreme Court are acting in the way they have done. Very clearly, you would have thought that any mayor would welcome an increase in law enforcement to try and help reduce the rampant crime, which is decimating vast areas of Chicago, quite frankly. It seemed to be effective in Washington, D.C. Let's see what happens next. The Supreme Court ruling is a major blow for this administration, but I think it does come down to one of procedure more than anything else.
Matthew, does this constitute an emergency in your eyes?
Look, I have seen some statistics that since the National Guard moved into Washington, D.C., homicides are down a bit. And a bit, I mean, each homicide is a lot, isn't it? But and that crime, I think, either generally or certain crimes are down a bit.
I think even what DC Mayor acknowledges that it has been a very successful endeavour.
I suspect, but again, we're in the territory of getting into Trump's mind here, I suspect that a lot of this for Trump is political. I think he probably is politicising the National Guard. Greg was defending him on the basis that Republican states were playing ball and perhaps Democrat cities were not. But nonetheless, I suspect he's targeting Democrat cities for a reason. Just to come back very briefly to something you said in your interview with Greg, which was that you said, unfortunately, there are legal barriers in this country. Well, it's called the rule of law. And if you want those legal barriers to change, then you've got to be successful in promoting a party to get into government that might change the law. But I'm very glad we have legal barriers in this country and that politicians can't act arbitrarily.
Steve, your thoughts?
It's interesting, isn't it, that the Supreme Court should be likely to sway in Donald Trump's favour. So that's interesting. As a Brit, it is very difficult to understand because it feels like saying, should the person in charge of the country have the ability to deploy law enforcement? Of course. For us, it feels like, should Rutland get to vote against sending the police in? But of course, it's different because they've got their weird states. So all of it feels odd.
Are you sure, though? Because there are a lot of barriers in this country which are analogous, if not the same, in that we do have, a Supreme Court, we have the blob or an administrative state, which hamper the will of the elected government more, in many instances. So it's not precisely the same, but we have analogous problems, I would suggest.
Well, and I suppose that would be analogous to America's deep state accusations, whereas what I was thinking about is the fact that you have this battle against the person in charge of the country in the states, because they have way more rights than we Brits can conceive, because we're used to the concept of a county, I suppose, effectively. But it comes down to whether you define this as an emergency, and it feels like all the rules set up to have this as an emergency meant something a bit bigger than this.
James, one of the challenges you've got there is a very specific part of the American Constitution called the Posse Comitatus Act, which basically prevents the American president from deploying the armed forces against American citizens on American territory. To do so, he has to federalise the National Guard, take it away from the command of the National Guard leader, who in every state is the governor, and declare an emergency, a very specific emergency. And the Supreme Court is basically saying this is not a specific emergency as we would define it. You are broadly defining it far too broadly.
It's playing politics with the American Constitution.
Well,
and in days gone past, you do that at your peril as an American president, I would suggest.
Well, whether or not that is the case, he certainly wouldn't be the first president to be accused of playing politics with the Constitution. It's time now to run through your front pages again. And I must concede, I feel a bit dirty running through these front pages. Telegraph, find me inappropriate friends. Again, a reference to Andrew. Mail, better story. Starmer's humiliating U-turn on farm tax. We had that uplifting interview with Paul Williams earlier on the benefits that will have for the British farming industry. The Express, fight goes on to completely scrap the farm rate. It will be interesting to see in coming days and months whether or not the government does go further than their partial back down today.
Well,
yesterday.
Can I jump in on that?
Sure.
Yeah, just quickly on the farm rate, because, as I said, I did call a year ago for the threshold to be raised, but there is a political argument that says, why should farmers be able to hand farms down to their children, presumably often one child rather than another, so I don't quite understand how that works within families. but not family businesses. So, for example, if you run a family business, you set up a family business in this country, as I understand it, you cannot pass that family business on to your son or daughter or both of them without inheritance tax being payable. So why is there a difference between farms and family businesses?
I don't think it's an unfair argument. I would scrap inheritance tax completely. I think it is a tax on the dead. I think it is one of the worst taxes imaginable.
So you'd raise income tax, would you?
No, I would cut spending. It is amazing how the left can't imagine that is there another option apart from raising taxes. But I would, it definitely is in my top
Don't you think
five.
the NHS is in trouble enough without you cutting our taxes?
I think we can cut plenty of things before we start cutting the NHS, but I won't take any more bait because I've already got the hook in my right cheek. The eye paper. Andrew, fun girls and inappropriate friends. Epstein files reveal new email exchanges. The Mirror. Find me some friends. The Sun, find fun girls for Andrew. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could write the headlines for you, but I've got to read what the newspapers are giving us. The Times in a better headline, farmers win, tax climb down. And actually, some breaking news for you tonight. The State Department announced Tuesday it was barring 5 Europeans it accused of leading efforts to pressure US tech firms to censor or suppress American viewpoints. Secretary of State Marco Rubio did not name those he said fell foul of a new visa policy announced in May to restrict the entry of foreigners deemed responsible for censorship of protected speech in the United States. He identified them only as radical activists and weaponised non-governmental organisations. Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy, Sarah posted on X referring to her interview with GB News earlier this month, stating, "Today, the United States issued sanctions, reinforcing the red line I invoked on GB News, namely extraterritorial censorship of Americans. Today's sanctions target the censorship NGO ecosystem." Here's what she initially told GB News.
It's misguided and unfortunate to apply that law in Britain, but applying that law extraterritorially, which means applying it to speech that has nothing to do with Britain, does not occur in Britain, is on American platforms by American users on American political issues, purporting to censor Americans in America is a deal breaker. It is a non-starter. It is a red line. And that's what Ofcom has tried to do with the Online Safety Act, and that's one reason the American government is concerned.
I want to go to James first. James, is this a fair decision or an incursion on British politics, an unreasonable incursion on British politics?
Well, I mean, from an American point of view, they'll say freedom of speech is enshrined in the Constitution and covers Americans. The question then is, should American law act extraterritorially, which they are clearly suggesting in this case? They are looking to defend American citizens. I understand why they're saying it, but certainly from a British point of view, any British lawmaker will say, well, just a second, we are sovereign, we're allowed to make laws up on our own deal, and if that happens to affect Americans who interact with British technology, so be it.
Steve, you're a pro freedom of speech. Are you happy with this outcome?
No, I just don't think it works. The idea that like, if the company was based in the UK, then yeah, we could get involved. But trying to change what an American company does because we might see it makes us feel really precious, doesn't it? Oh, we couldn't could you change it over there so that we can't see it? If you really want to do that, have some sort of bizarre system where you edit the internet. That's the only way to make it work.
It's tricky territory, of course, as social media is causing all sorts of issues and problems. I thought it was quite interesting, actually, one of the front pages yesterday, The Telegraph, talking about non-hate crime incidents that police chiefs are going to suggest, I think, to the Home Secretary that they stop logging non-hate crime incidents, which, of course, far predate this Labour government. But I just thought it was astonishing to hear that from the American Undersecretary, because, of course, America uses its laws, applies its laws extraterritorially itself. So to be saying that's a non-starter for the UK trying to do, whatever you think of the merits, to point the finger at the UK and say, what are you guys doing that? The Americans do it quite a lot themselves.
Is that a fair point, James?
Well, this is a great question about the extent to which American law should apply only territorially or extraterritorially. And again, if you think about the way in which the media is being consumed in this day and age, whether we think about this issue, whether we think about Donald Trump, of course, suing the BBC on the simple basis of, well, where does jurisdiction begin in all these cases? Can he sue in a Florida court for a broadcast made in the United Kingdom that might not have ever been broadcast in the United States for defamation? These issues all cut to the chase about what it is that the remit of the media is this day and age, who consumes it and under what laws. And I don't think anybody's quite got their arms around that yet.
The other secretary can fight our corner, but we can also call her a hypocrite.
Well, yeah, questions that are far, far too existential and deep for this stage of the evening for me, so I'm going to go to something which I will find far more enjoyable. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I promised I wouldn't rub it in about the Ashes. I won't. I want to celebrate one of the great parties in modern times. This was between the second and third Ashes tests where Brendan McCullum, Baz, the English coach, decided that the lads needed a bit of time off in Queensland, particularly in Noosa, which is a pretty posh getaway place in Queensland. There is some wonderful footage of the lads really acting professionally as the deciding test was imminent.
Do you know what you're saying? Do you know how to get home?
No.
That's what I'm saying.
Do you want me to get you an Uber to the Nets, bro? It's probably for the best.
What, to the what? I don't know what that means.
To the Nets.
What does that mean?
See, the thing is, you're actually like, he's a
I am not a Greg, though. I'm not. This is too English for you. I am not.
people know me. I know you, brother. I know you, but listen.
That is allegedly English batsman Ben Duckett, possibly a bit worse for wear, as a very helpful Australian fan offers him an Uber to the Nets, bro. Matthew, do you think it's good that these guys were going out getting on the drink in between the second and third Ashes tests?
If that is real footage, and of course I've seen it, then that is a very not good thing to have happened. Listening to your voice for the last couple of hours, Will, has been rather triggering.
Yeah,
not because of what you said to me last time we met, but because it's Australian. And the last few weeks, for me as a passionate England cricket fan, has been very distressing. It has been a shambles of a tour. And I've, broadly speaking, been a fan of Bazball. And I think Ben Stokes is an extraordinary figure. But the idea that when you're 2-0 down, if that was indeed Ben Duckett, who has failed consistently in this series as an opener, sadly, he's a very good batsman, but he's failed. The idea that you go out and drink to that extent and then lose the next test when people have spent life savings travelling to Australia to watch these guys. I'm sorry, but my patience has
and I'll
snapped
say
at that
I've
point.
done my job by triggering you tonight, Matthew. It's Christmas Eve, ladies and gentlemen, now, and you'll all be, again, my producer forced me to say this, feline festive. Take a look at this. Well, I hope that gave you as much pleasure as it gave Maria in the back there. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Christmas Eve. This is a time to spend with family, and of course, we're so grateful at GB News that you choose to spend your evenings, it will now be your mornings, with us. We consider the GB News community one big family, and it's great that we're able to spend what a festive season together with you. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Thank you to my wonderful panel. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be running through the festive season. There will be activities all the way through to New Year's and beyond. Thank you for spending time watching the People's Channel, GB News.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.